So moving on to our next presentation, which is given by ThreatLocker, one of our exhibitors, and by Eoin Mcgrath, who's a solutions engineer with ThreatLocker. Eoin has worked in solutions engineering for the company in EMEA with over 20 years' experience in the MSP and software development fields. And this is another zero trust presentation. Zero trust at the endpoint, fighting ransomware with allow listing and ring fencing. A very important subject. Eoin, good to see you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Eoin, and I'm a solutions engineer with ThreatLocker. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about allow listing, ring fencing, ransomware, and just the cyber world in general. So the very first thing we need to consider about zero trust and this entire environment is just who are our adversaries. And when an awful lot of us started out in cybersecurity, these adversaries, they're enthusiasts, the old-fashioned hacker who wanted to figure out what was happening on the system. There were opportunists who saw, hey, if I can do this, I'm going to be able to install games. There were those idealists that wanted, the open internet. And finally, there were marketers who wanted to, sell you stuff. And really, in the end, all these guys were playground bullies. You got a wedgie and, you moved on the next day. That's not an accurate depiction of me as a school child, but we'll leave it at that. And how were these guys doing this? So, very old school stuff. They were sending you executables in mail. There was VBS scripts that went around. We all remember I love you. Lots of people were kind of lonely and they clicked on it. I wonder what would have happened if we had Tinder back then. And then when they were getting a little bit more sophisticated, they'd send you a zip file with an exe in it, and you'd execute it, and suddenly you're in trouble again. Then, remember open relays? You could send an email from anybody to anybody, and again, you could use that to go and exploit and try and start to cause problems in an environment. And then finally, there was vulnerabilities. This is where these idealists came in. They'd take a piece of software and say, hey, Bill Gates, why don't you sort this out, and let's fix everything. Again, but that was the old days. Now, everything is a lot more sophisticated. You're dealing with gangs, the people who are behind Conti, which is probably a nation-state actor as well. You're dealing with ransomware as a service. There's people out there who are making lots and lots of money out of exploiting SMEs or governments. You see, recently the Albanian government was taken down by the Iranians, again, due to this. So you have nation-state actors that are out there, and they're going to try and cause you problems as well. Malware is incredibly sophisticated these days. It's no longer just a Word document with a macro in it. These things are packaged out, and really sophisticated attacks are developed. But essentially, malware is still just software. If you decompile a piece of malware, you're going to find that same example code that you might use in your own applications. Pieces of software that have been taken from GitHub or Stack Overflow, legitimate pieces of software, but they've been weaponized and used against you as a piece of malware. And also, these attackers are going to use valid pieces of software. They're going to use your remote access tools to help them to exfiltrate the data or to give them access to your environments. They're going to use those IP scanners that you use to discover a network printer. They're going to try and use it to find a vulnerability on your environment. So we need to be aware of all of these scenarios. And we've been trying to prevent this forever. There are so many different tools that are there that are going to try and detect and deny these problems. What we need to do is we need to kind of move forward, and we need to change our mindset with these things. And what we want to do from now on is we just want to block everything. Deny everything by default. If we don't know what it is, we're going to block it, whether it's an executable, whether it's a DLL, whether it's a script. They just need to be blocked by default. It's actually quite simple when you go right down to the kernel level. Stop anything from running that we haven't explicitly allowed. And with ThreatLocker, we do this pretty easily. We have our learning mode where we discover everything that's executing, and then we create that allow list to let you go and be happy that only the executables that you want to run are able to run in your environment. Now, 2021 was a pretty impressive year in terms of software exploits. You had SolarWinds, you had the Exchange exploit that came out, again, exploited by nation states. You had, lots of RMM problems where malware was pushed out via those important management tools. You had Print Nightmare, attacking one of the most fundamental things that people do, printing on their networks. You had Office exploits. You had Log4j affecting everybody. In total, there was over 21,000 CVEs that were reported last year. Every one of those potentially opening cybersecurity holes and cybersecurity problems in your environments. And again, vulnerabilities and features are used by your attackers. Something that is essential for Office to operate was used with the Felina exploit that was out there a couple of months ago. Microsoft's error detection and reporting tool was exploited to give those attackers a way to get into your environment. The same way, if there's a port open on one of your servers, the attackers are going to latch onto it and use that to help them with their attacks. So what we need to do here is we need to defend as close to the vulnerable applications as we possibly can. If you have a detection tool and it's detecting something that's happening on the internet or happening in an application, it's not going to know exactly what that exploit is going to do when it gets down onto your particular endpoint. So again, you need to really get right down to the level and just stop these processes from happening. Again, what we want to do is we just want to go ahead and we want to block everything. Then the next category of attacks that we need to consider are those that live off the land. Yes, it's nice and sophisticated for an attacker if they can download a prepackaged tool, but an awful lot of them are going to be sophisticated to the point that they'll know they can exploit, PowerShell on your environment, whatever compilers and things that might be there, and they can create a living off the land attack. Again, if we prevent the execution of all of these different processes, it closes down those cybersecurity holes with a technology we call ring fencing. So you're taking Office and you're preventing it from reaching out to PowerShell. That's one vector of attack that they might want to use. You're taking your RMM tool and you're preventing it from connecting to unauthorized websites. Again, another ring fence in place to prevent your environment from being exploited. And again, prevent PowerShell from accessing your system files and folders so the data can't be exfiltrated and can't be exploited against you. Now, vulnerable servers are an entirely different matter. All the external attacker needs to do is to latch onto a port, and they're going to be able to go and start exploiting that as well. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a little overview of the Exchange exploits that happened last year and indeed are still happening, just how serious they are and just what they're able to do. And this is a real-world scenario from a ThreatLocker environment of what we saw, what we detected, and the actions that our software took place to prevent this potential attack from happening. So what we see here is in our ThreatLocker logs, we've discovered a new startup process. Because of our default deny policy, this startup process was not allowed to execute. So obviously, we decided we'd need to go and investigate to see where did this start program come from. So we checked it out in VirusTotal. We checked it out against all of the different heuristic tools. Nothing was detected. This had never been seen before. Moving on, we needed to find out how this was created. And that startup file was created by IIS. So that's a little bit concerning. Why is our web server creating startup files in our environment? We investigated a little bit further, and we found that the configuration on our Exchange offline address books was changed. It was set with a URL, and that's actually a valid URL that you're going to see here. And that was going to go and download the malicious code onto your environment. When that malicious code, obviously, when it's downloaded, it's encoded. It doesn't make a lot of sense for people to see. When we get it decoded, though, what we're going to find out is this had a malicious payload. And again, that malicious payload downloads a valid Microsoft executable. PSExec is signed by Microsoft. It's not a virus, but it's there and it's being used to exploit. So this Microsoft component that runs at a system level, it downloads this code. It creates a GPO on our environment, pushes the ransomware out, and in our lab environment, within 2 hours, everything was encrypted, and all of the data that was on those endpoints was uploaded to an anonymous location on the internet. So through something really, really simple, that exploit that attached to an Exchange server, an entire environment was encrypted and exfiltrated in under 2 hours. If you're not at the desk, if you're not in the office, you're not going to see this happening. By the time an awful lot of reporting tools are going to kick in, it's too late. That data is there. Your Exchange, via PowerShell, via system tools, has been encrypted, and you're there facing ransomware, facing blackmail, facing all those problems that, it's the nightmare scenario for a business or an enterprise to come against. But with the correct tools in place, with this concept of zero trust, that nothing you haven't seen before and that nothing that you haven't permitted is able to execute, we are able to prevent attacks like that from happening. So in ThreatLocker, we like to think of a security triangle. There's a number of different factors that you need to have. So obviously, you have the human factor, where we need to take in your security awareness training. Don't pick up a USB key and plug it in. Don't go and click on random links. Don't run every other exe. Then you have your detection side of the triangle. That's where your phishing, your antivirus, your anti-spam, and your threat hunting applications come into play. And then finally, you have your controls. You have your firewall. You have elevation control. You have allow listing. You have control on your network. You have ring fencing, like I mentioned. And taken all together, that's going to help you build a truly secure environment. So in our solution, we're very heavy on the control end of things. So you have your allow listing, that elevation, the ring fencing and storage. Taken all together, it helps you build that zero trust security. We have our applications that are out there. Please go check them out. Our allow listing is really effective and it's very good at stopping those 0 days, like I mentioned in the example with Exchange. Our deployment is really easy. Our ring fencing helps you to stop 0 days. We're very cost effective. And this is my final, and I think this is probably the best example. This is a screenshot from some ransomware as a service. And they're recommending the best way to stop their ransomware is with application allow listing. Only allow those necessary applications to run. So if the bad guys are saying this is the best solution, maybe we should listen to them just this once. So thanks everybody for your attention, and my colleague and I are in the hall, so if anybody would like to come out and chat to us, please do. So thank you.